Good morning. Welcome to our session on Liftoff for Tech Interdependence. I'd like to welcome all of our guests here in Davos, Switzerland, as well as those joining us online. We have an all-star cast today, and we're going to explore the topic of technology, interdependence, and how these new technologies are coming together and creating solutions that we haven't seen or even imagined in some cases before. What does that mean, and what can we expect in the year ahead? Now, with us today, I have Mr. Aiman Ezzat, CEO of Capgemini, Magdalena Skipper, Editor-in-Chief, Nature Magazine, Aidan Gomez, CEO at Cohere, Cristiano Amon, President, CEO at Qualcomm, and Hiroaki Kitano, Executive Deputy President and Chief Technology Officer at Sony. So in today's discussion, we want to unpack this question of these wide range of emerging technologies. I think we're all familiar with the advances that we see in AI, and they're coming more quickly than even the people creating them might have imagined they might emerge. But it's not only in AI. We see similar progress in synthetic biology, in IoT, edge computing, space, quantum computing. And what's often missed when we look at these technologies individually or through a singular lens is that they're often interconnected and feeding off of one another. And this leads to actually a kind of compounding and accelerating impact it has. So we'd like to unpack that a little bit today. And to kick off, I'd actually like to start with you, Aiman. Mm-hmm. You're working across a range of these technologies. And what's different? What are you seeing that's changing here, if anything? And what are we to make of these?
Sure. So, of course, we are in business and technology. We are interested in both. So we are very interested about how technology is shifting business strategy. And of course, not just individual technology, but the mix of technologies. We sometimes look at technologies individually. We should look at the combination or even how they intersect to be able to drive fundamental changes. I mean, if you go historically, one of the interesting one, of course, is the combination of mobile computing and connectivity, which has created the mobile industry. And the mobile industry is not just about creating mobiles, but how it created a whole new ecosystem around it that goes to creating new business models, changing customer, of course, interaction and making them digital, but beyond that, also having a whole influence on society through the development of social media. And I think that's one of the interesting things to look at is how these changes are happening. But these changes are also happening today if you combine things like AI and spatial computing or advanced sensors and bioengineering. And just an example that's public I can share with you is that we got involved with the America's Cup to try to work on making the invisible visible. What are we talking about? We're talking about wind patterns. How can you simulate wind patterns in real time?
Sounds complex.
So it sounds complex. But here, using spatial computing with connectivity and with AI, we were able to do that using LiDAR technology and a few other things. And when you look at it, yes, by making the wind visible and wind pattern, then that was for the America's Cup. But now you can apply it to many other areas. For example, in terms of environmental monitoring, looking at forest fires and things like that, if you can visualize the wind and the direction of the wind in real time, you can, of course, make completely different decisions. Same thing in marine technology. Or you think about air traffic control, to look at, air disturbance in airports and knowing where the patterns are and how you should basically evolve things. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about more and more is around basically how do you look at the combination between different technologies, what impact it has in actual impacting basically business and business strategy and potential users.
Yeah. I'd like to come to you next, Magdalena. You're in a unique position because you see this even before the technologies get deployed, right? For both scientific, academic, and also helping general readers understand. Are you seeing changes in the space, both what's coming to you and also the speed?
Absolutely. And so, of course, at Nature, we combine both the journalistic aspect, so as you say, writing about research, technology development for, let's just say, interested and to some extent informed audience. This is not a popular science publication, of course, as well as original research that appears in our pages. And of course, things have changed. And, I can talk about a very long perspective. Nature has been around for 155 years, and of course, a great deal has changed in that time. So let me start at a high level, sort of conceptually, and then I'll use some examples which actually in many ways follow on from the examples that you gave. So at a conceptual level, I like to think about the broad sort of trajectory of our discovery, broadly speaking, which ultimately leads to implementation and technology development. So, if you come with me back to 1869, when Nature was first published, we were sort of still in the age of the sort of Renaissance men doing science, and they were really almost exclusively men, of course. But the individuals who were engaging in that discovery and beginning to think how that may be implemented were not really compartmentalized the way that they were, let's say, in the 20th century, where they were very much zoomed into their own discipline, but they were thinking more across disciplines. Now, the 20th century was very much a focus on a disciplinarian, really drilling in, enabled by developments in technology and tools that allowed us to really look very closely at specific disciplines. And today we're beginning to sort of come out again, empowered with all the information that the sort of specialists par excellence have developed, and continuing to get these very specific, detailed information, but now coming out of it into a broader context. And of course, that's enabled by connectivity, by greater mobility, and these aspects which are pertinent across disciplines. And of course, AI was already mentioned, that's just one example, but there are many others. So again, extending on the examples that you mentioned, the kinds of exciting things that I see submitted to our journals, and then you all see when we publish them, are, for example, questions and solutions that at once look at problems in material science, but also problems in biology. So this is bio-inspired materials, which allow us to, for example, capitalize our knowledge of how our environment is sensed in biology by biological organisms, and then use organic materials to implement this in material science. So engineered biosensors are much more biocompatible, much more flexible, can be actually part of organic organisms' bodies, or directly, sometimes printed on the skin directly. Another example...
maybe if I could pause, so we'll have a chance to come back to that one.
Sure.
Maybe before I pass over to Aidan, I just would like to understand one thing. We hear about this compression, that the technologies are emerging more quickly, and we see this kind of compression and speed. Do you see that where you sit on the publication side? This is actually for you, Magdalena. When you see it, Nature, do you see actually higher quality, publications coming in more quickly than previously, or do you see a kind of continuous rate of change there with the kind of technologies you're seeing at Nature?
This is a question for me.
Yeah.
So in certain areas, progress is faster, but qualitatively speaking, there isn't a great difference, because of course you always see that a certain discipline is accelerated by certain tool development in their discipline, that becomes saturated, maybe plateaus, and something else comes in. Certainly the scale of publication, so the scale of data sets, analysis, new knowledge that is delivered in any one scientific manuscript, that is increasing quite dramatically. If I can just add for a second, I think there is reason to pause here, because of course what I'm also describing is that effectively a cost of any one scientific paper to actually generate the knowledge is rising, which in itself is an interesting challenge. How can we reduce the cost of that innovation, new tool development for further downstream knowledge increase?
Great, maybe that's a good transition to you, Aidan. We're talking about both the speed. I think you're at the forefront of driving a lot of these changes, but we also see the increasing costs. And I think there's this discussion on whether the cost for the compute's going faster than the improvement in the algorithms to drop those costs. But it'd be great to hear what you're seeing from where you sit.
Yeah, I think a lot has changed in the past year. So early on, it was very much enterprises thinking about POCs and testing and getting familiar with the technology. Now we're starting to see enterprises exit that phase and go to production. And that's leading to new demands. Certainly cost reduction is one of them. But I actually think that's less important to enterprises than the actual performance and intelligence of the models. And so we'll continue to see models get bigger, more expensive. But there's definitely a high priority on compressing down. In terms of pace, I think from my perspective, since I'm in it every single day, it's too slow. But every once in a while, we get a breakthrough. I think the most recent of those are this new category of model called reasoning models. And it's a paradigm shift in terms of how the models go about their work. If you think about what a large language model does, its input space is all of language, right? So it's literally anything. You can ask it 1 + 1 or to prove Fermat's theorem. And the output space, it has to respond immediately. And so the user expectation is huge. Your input is literally everything, and you have to get the right answer on the first try. That's obviously wrong, right? We shouldn't spend the same amount of effort on very wildly different levels of difficulty. And what reasoning lets you do is the model actually sits down and thinks through problems. And so now it can spend a dynamic amount of energy and effort on different problems. That unlocks a completely new category of problem. These agentic tasks, you actually expect the models to fail on their first try. That's okay, that's part of learning the problem, and then it needs to be able to try again. So these reasoning models will just unlock a whole new tier of capability in the technology. And the other thing is, what we're finding about them is they can be distilled extremely effectively. So that means taking it from the massive model that costs $1 billion to train and putting them in a tiny one that can be deployed on edge is extremely effective.
Great. I think that's you set up the transition there. You know, we have these multi-million-dollar, even people talk about billion-dollar data centers that are there. I think we're not going to be doing that at the edge, and you have one of the most widely distributed perspectives on this with your technology being embedded throughout. What do you see?
Okay, well, it's a very broad question, and maybe I'll start addressing AI. But I think when you start the panel, you talk about the number of technologies that we're seeing right now moving very fast, and I'm just going to list quickly some of the ones we're working on. I think we have seen that what happened. Aiman mentioned about the mobile revolution, connectivity and computing, but that's happening now everywhere. Everything is becoming connected, is becoming intelligent. I think we saw that as computational power go to multiple different things. We probably saw revolutions happening out of automotive industry. The car right now is advanced computer, is a new computing surface, and computing is becoming the most important part of the car. We see that what's happening in industries. And then on top of this, you have a number of different trends of technology. You have the ability to computers now understand human language, and that's enabled by those large language models and Gen AI. You can actually communicate with the computer, and that's not only how we think about a prompt in text, also in how do you see things, how do you hear things. And I think when you combine that with all the computation that is going on, all the different devices, it creates incredible opportunity. And I think just to pick on what my colleague was saying, if you look of different directions that AI is going, and you have now very effective compressed SLM, smaller models. You have mix of experts coming up, which you have a model which is really focused on a particular aspect in a particular knowledge base. You have multimodal ability to process different types of inputs. And you combine that with the computing that you have on the edge, you see an incredible transformation, especially as you move from training to production. And we're obviously very excited about this, but we are seeing, for example, the ability to run models. There were in the order of 15 billion parameters, 20 billion parameters into a phone, into 30 billion parameters into a PC, 60 billion parameter models into a car. And And I think that's revolutionary because you have the ability to fundamentally change the cost equation, especially as you go to production, but also you have things that are very important for the user, like latency. If you are in a car and you literally are going to be talking to your car, I think a Gen AI interface is perfect if you're behind the wheel. You want a response right away. Certain things that you do and you ask a question, you want the model to respond right away. Latency becomes incredibly important. Privacy becomes important. And there are even some new techniques. It's actually fascinating to see it. We have done a number of demonstrations of combining a small model into the device at the edge with the big model into the cloud. And what happened, you can even see it as you ask a question to the prompt, to the model, and you start to generate the tokens. All of a sudden, it deletes a couple of tokens and comes back in because it starts sending draft tokens to the cloud, and the big model corrects it. And I think we're going to see a big change coming as we benefit of all this computing and distributing. I think this will accelerate, the use of AI and the use of computing at the edge broadly.
Thank you. Really exciting and also interesting, this interplay among models. I think Kitano-san, is your role as CTO, you're also looking at the interplay across these different technologies. You share a little bit about what is most surprising for you right now with what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think for very interesting things going on in all directions. If you look at all the big picture, we are really trying to understand and control very, very large dynamical nonlinear systems. And this is something we are really going for, like AI, biomedical, environmental, or predicting wind pattern, designing America's Cup winning report, for example. Everything we do now is really about understanding and then controlling very large-scale dynamical system. And for example, in the understanding side, we have a lot of sensor systems. We have all the measurement, laser optics, and all that. And then you have an AI system to be able to make sense out of that and provide some of the possible interventions or experiment to verify that. And then we have biomedical. We have a CRISPR-Cas9 or all kind of a method to intervene. It's no other technology is getting there. So and then really the combination of that is, for example, it would be really powerful to have AI scientists and in the biomedical combined with the robotics and the laser optics and then synthetic chemistry, really give us extremely important breakthrough in the drug discovery, regenerative medicines, reproductive medicines, and aging control, and that is. So it's not really one area which is important. You really have to combine together because we're dealing with very complex. Over 25 years ago, back in the middle 90s, I kind of proposed a field called systems biology. I published a couple of papers. With Magdalena, actually was a senior editor at the time, and we worked together, publishing the series paper. And we consider let's do the systems view on the biology, and that's the way to go. Now, after 25 and 30 years in systems, everyone found out, wow, that's so complicated. So this is not the area human scientists alone were able to dissect it. We have to work with the AI system, which can be able to digest a very large scale informations, come up with the hypothesis, making sense out of that. Large language model, LMN, or foundation model for the science is the things which moving forward. Probably not the final form. We're going to have a series of evolutions. So what we're trying to do with the next stage is trying to find the AI scientists or AI engineers. Probably I would say AI scientists. Either as a tool or a highly autonomous AI scientist to be able to help us doing the science or do the science by themselves and then make things much faster. So I think that is really now there's the tipping point. It's really the inflection point. And what is happening in the scene in AI is the very early stage of industry revolutions. We're talking about the productivity. So we have ChatGPT or all the Cohere's applications and all that, enable us to do things much more efficiently, much more accurately. Then we're going to creativity industry, people can do the creative artwork or entertainment. That will come. And then we're going to have AI AI scientists, which will fundamentally change the way we do science. And our civilization is based on scientific discovery, how to take that into the technology. And this impact of like AI propelled science in unprecedented speed will change the form of the civilization for decades to come. I think that is like something we are looking into.
Yeah, and what you're describing is, highly complex there.
Yeah.
I guess one question I have is you start to see this interplay and interdependence among the technologies.
Yeah.
Absent the AI scientists, and the question, how do you train the AI scientists? How do you actually manage to combine these in a way and also manage the risks? I'm going to just open this up for the panel at broad and this aspect of this tension between, driving the progress while also understanding the complexity that's embedded in these kind of new emerging technologies when you start to combine them.
I mean,
Aiman and then Magdalena? Yeah.
No, go ahead, I'll come in.
no, I think what's interesting is when technologies combine, and again, we look at it from a business perspective, industries don't just evolve, they restructure. And I think the disruptive level that it brings makes it more and more challenging, especially more and more technologies, and is disrupting many industries completely. I mean, value chains can split. I mean, look at what's happening around mobility, and Cristiano was talking about it. How the car is evolving, but it's changing completely even how do you use the car, what is used for the car, how it gets connected in the whole new ecosystem, providing new services to the driver. It's not just about mobility. It's basically you're creating, again, a new ecosystem that's creating there. And the challenges usually is to be able to try to predict for businesses, what is new, but also what is next, because you have to try to anticipate. And I think we heard the AI and bioengineering. I think the interesting example is what's happening in healthcare, coming from that, because you're transforming how treatment is administered, you're transforming how drug is being discovered, or even, the efficiency of development. So you can think about the new wearables, for example. New wearables now with medical, grade biosensors who are basically capturing information in real time. Now this data is being analyzed by AI systems to try to identify and flag patterns that have to help to anticipate, some potential issues or symptoms in terms of diseases, which then allow you to move a lot more towards preventive, versus, hospitalized people. Yeah. So that's one example. But also a lot of this data is also generated by AI, can now be used as well in the development of personalized therapies or personalized drugs. And suddenly you're moving to a predictable, healthcare environment, which basically helps you to reduce hospitalization, but also create new models in terms of for patients, for providers, but also for pharmaceutical companies. So you're thinking really now you're going into what I would call ecosystem convergence and the impact it can have on redefining completely industries.
Thank you. Magdalena?
So I think it's worth explicitly articulating one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet. And you just used the word ecosystem. Each of the panelists talked about generation of new knowledge, new data, modeling, iterating on that knowledge and discovery. And that ecosystem is, of course, inhabited or created by researchers, engineers, developers, talent that exists in academia and in the private sector. And until recently, relatively recently, those two worlds have existed in relative isolation. So, and I look at it from a perspective of an editor who wants to publish new insights so that they are available to everyone in a way that is robust, that's been tested, verified, and then it can be built upon, right? That's a principle of how science unfolds. And until very recently, that way of communicating the outcomes of the process I just described has been almost an exclusive domain of the academic sphere, but not of the private sector. Mm-hmm. And I say almost, Hiroaki mentioned earlier, 20 years ago we were collaborating in particular, and Sony is one example of a private sector research enterprise that continues to contribute to that sort of formal research communication. Now, why am I saying this? Because I think that's something that is beginning to change and needs to change to enable true building on knowledge and technology development. That sort of common language, publication, but also open source sharing of innovation will enable much faster and, interestingly and importantly, again, something we keep touching on, multidisciplinary benefits across sector and across disciplines.
Yeah,
Very important point.
yeah,
Kitano-san.
I can actually substantiate what the Magdalena just says. Like most recent work we did at the Sony AI is creating a highly autonomous, superhuman capable driving agent for the PlayStation game Gran Turismo. We had the cover page of a story of nature, I think 2 years ago. And that actually have a goal of creating a superhuman agent to make it the game much more creative. But like, when we decide to do that, we have the very fundamental science in it. Because we have to create AI agent which can have a highly physical realistic autonomous car simulation system, and to be able to push the limit of the vehicle control at maximum speed and have to do maneuver in racing conditions to be able to overtake. There's all kind of tactical maneuvers because it's a racing game, right? So we have to come up with that entirely new conceptual and theoretical framework, not just application of something already there, and then do it and run the like a large-scale computing platform or the PlayStation's servers and then the clusters, and then train for months, and then do the real competition against top human Gran Turismo drivers, and then get the data, iterate it, and then get to the production stage to actually deploy into the game, and then we publish the paper in the Nature. And then a year later, all the agent is commercially deployable, and then if you go to the PlayStation game, Gran Turismo, you can play against this agent. So that's actually streamlining to very, very theoretical research, proof of concept, publishable academic work, more or less, and then immediately go into the production stage. And that's entire process is 3 years. And that is actually the speed of the AI and some of the technology we're going right now. It's not just like taking from the something already established. Sometimes you have to really go into the basics because the theory is not there. So I think that's something like all the tech companies facing, more or less, is if there's available technology, more or less it's an engineering problem. But if you're going to the turf that science is not there, you have to do the science yourself. Even a private company, no exception, you have to do it. Otherwise, you won't get it.
Yeah, Cristiano, you know a lot about automotives and cars. You just continue that, transition. We're going from theory in the virtual world, Gran Turismo. What does that look like as that actually continues into the automobiles that we drive around?
Yes. So one of the I think technologies happen on the car. One is assisted driving and autonomy. And in assisted driving autonomy, it's evolving very fast, especially as you get more data. We've been jointly developing with BMW, with Stack, for a BMW car is going to be launching in the second half. And you do a combination of, you have incredible, I think, benefits from using models with generative AI, for example, to get the input that comes from all the cameras from the cars. But at the same time, you also have the rule base, because the use case in a car is a little different. The car cannot make a mistake. The first decision needs to be the right decision, especially if you're doing autonomous driving. And we've seen, I think, incredible evolution of this. I envision a future that assisted driving is going to be a feature of every single car, I think, no matter what the tier of the car is. And I think AI is going to be fundamental to make that happen. But the other way to think about cars, and I want to make a bridge between cars and different devices. Sometimes it's not about looking at the benefit of AI and applying to things that we do every day. You don't have to create a new science, but you can see some examples. One of the things that is becoming incredibly popular, like we have been working with Meta on the project for the Ray-Ban glasses, and I think it surprised everybody's expectations. The reason is when you put a smart glass, even the one that with no display, there's cameras, but because of AI, what you see the glass sees. What you hear, the glass hears. And you start to see incredible applications. Yes, you can think about you walking around and asking questions and get answered. But for example, Aiman said about the issue of healthcare. One of the things that we see in the healthcare industry right now, doctors and all healthcare companies, insurance companies are going to tell you, they spend to the order of 30% of their time filling the medical records and say, this is what happened with this patient and all that. So you can have something as simple as continue to have the medical appointment you have today, you're wearing those glasses. The glass saw and heard what you heard from the patient, know what's relevant, document summarization, you summarize, approve the record, you move on. Like the efficiency is very, very high. You apply the same exact technology to the car. We have all those cameras in the car that we use for assisted driving, but you also have a different use case. What the camera is seeing, the car is seeing, so you can say, look, I'm going to drive, I need to find this place. As soon as you see it, let me know. And the car will be able to recognize and do it. So I think the application is very, very broad. It's in very single industry, and it doesn't have to be complicated. I think we're actually achieving the point that those things are going to be commercially deployed at scale.
Great. And before I go to Aidan, if anybody in the audience would like to come in and ask a question, we'll have that opportunity. Just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. Aidan, over to you.
Yeah, no, I was just going to comment on that story of research going into production super quickly and that pipeline compressing. I think within the LLM space, it's actually inverted. And so we don't have time to go through a publishing cycle before pushing to market. A model takes 3 months to train. We get the result, we see it. We're not going to wait to publish that in a journal and then we know it's better than what was there before and we're pushing that to our customers immediately. And so now there's a retroactive, hey, here's what we did, we describe things afterwards. So the competitive pressures of market are so intense, we've actually seen an inversion on that pipeline. The second thing was around integration of these systems. One of the key bottlenecks to value in generative AI is the fact that if you think about it, these models are only as useful to an enterprise as the data and systems that they can access. And there are so many barriers, including privacy and access to data, customization. So there's really an integration project, which I think is going to take years to plug these models into all of the systems so that the models can start to drive.
Great, thank you. I see a question at the back. If we can get a mic there. And if you can identify yourself and also signal if you have someone specific you'd like to address your question to.
Yeah, absolutely. Amir Hussain from World Quant Foundry. My question is really for the team at Sony, and you are the representative here. But I'm quite well familiar with Peter Stone's work on the driving model. Actually, he's a very good friend of mine. I've always been amazed at how Japanese companies in general, Sony in particular, but also Honda with Asimo, for years and years have really taken on this mantle of AI and have been very AI forward and have made huge investments over decades to push this work. But yet when it comes to actually now the dawn of real working AI, we see a large number of American companies take the lead. Why?
Well, that's a very interesting question, actually. We maintain substantial robotics and AI capability inside. Stay tuned. We're not just disclosing it. Okay, so there's a lot more things. Whatever form of the robotics, we have extremely fast sensor system, and we have extremely good physical realistic simulations, AI to learn it, perceptions and tactical decisions in real time. And then the robotic system to be able to, make decisions and then react to that. And we have a project. Okay, so you're gonna see, we're not fading away. Okay, we are in a game. Okay, so at the same time, it's very interesting because, as you mentioned previously, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if you talk about humanoid, it's all Japanese companies or government research lab. And then now you see like, lines of, humanoid in US companies, some European and Chinese companies. Okay, I think one of the issue is like when we tried a Japanese company and the university, national institute tried the humanoid, we couldn't really find the decent application at that time. Technology is interesting, it's fascinating to create a humanoid, but where we're going to apply to the humanoid robot, maybe some logistics, some manufacturing process, but of course the manufacturing process, there's like a manipulator kind of robot, right? So why you need a humanoid instead of all the manipulations? And then why you have to have a bi-legged robot rather than wheels and manipulator on top of that. So I mean, we have like a real boom right now, but we have to see next 5 years if humanoid really survive and they get a general purpose robotics that we can actually see, because the humanoid is not cheap. Humanoid is very expensive. We have gone through that. And then decisions that most of the robotic research as a company made, so we have like a diversity of robotics shape and then all the task delineations. That's why much less emphasis in the humanoid and emphasis on more specialized robotic and specific shape. Now we have like a resurgence of humanoid. I'm very excited about this, but I'm very curious to see what would be the things that the humanoid can fit for. And of course, like a technology is different. We have much better sensor. We have a Gen AI. We have so like in the light of new technologies, whether we see like completely opening the area for the humanoid, that makes sense in terms of the business, in terms of technological evolutions. But I think many of the Japanese companies and research institutions retain the capability. So once actually, the market is opening, I think people will jump in.
Great, thank you. If we could get a mic to the front here.
Thank you. Ken Dillon with Occidental. It's a question for the whole panel, but just a quick answer. If we're all back here in 10 years, what is the AI topic of the day then?
Like Aidan?
Yeah, I can try. It moves so quickly, it's really hard to say. I think no one can see out 10 years, so I'm not going to pretend to do that. Even a year is kind of hard to see. Reasoning is a huge unlock. I already spoke about that. The next one is learning from experience. So these models today, we spend tons of money training them. And then we push them to production, and they're fixed. They're frozen. They don't change. They don't learn from their interaction with the real world. That will change and unlock a new set of categories. In terms of like big picture problems, I do wonder about the impact to the job market. And we were talking about that earlier before the panel. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens. I can't see out 10 years, but definitely you'll see capabilities that are much more human, much more capable, and they'll start to be able to do these things that we view as uniquely human, and to be able to do them oftentimes better and more efficiently than humans. Yeah.
Good. Magdalena, then Cristiano, then Aiman.
So I have a flippant part of my answer and a more sensible part of my answer. I think the second part is more sensible. So the flippant part is we won't be here. It'll be our avatars here. We'll be somewhere else in 10 years' time. But the real answer, I think a more interesting answer is, in 10 years' time, all these tools and agents we're talking about will need to be sustainable from the energy cost perspective. We're talking about deploying AI. So the panel, of course, is about technology liftoff. AI is without a question an enabling element to it, but it's from a sustainability perspective today an incredibly expensive element. We need to solve that issue, otherwise we're creating all sorts of other issues. I think that's important. And just to build on what you mentioned as well about the fact that we put these things out there and they stop growing and interacting, really thinking about some of the other themes that came up on the panel, that interactivity across disciplines, across human and AI interface is hugely important, hugely enabling. Across disciplines, across solutions. No one inventor, no one organization can think of all potential ways to implement whatever it is they're developing. So again, that communication, whether it happens through publication, before or after, or some other way, needs to happen in order for us to accelerate that discovery and implementation of those discoveries. And hopefully we'll be there in 10 years' time.
Good. Cristiano?
Yeah, I agree with, it's hard to predict 10 years, but maybe there's a couple things we can probably say it's going to, we have ability to understand how it's going to be in 10 years. So just to be provocative a little bit, if you look at all of us, mankind, I think as the years went by and the toys change, but we still kind of communicate the same way. We see things, we hear things, we talk. And when you think about the computers that assist us to do things, if you just go to the history of the personal computer, we have been adapting to the ability of the computer to interact with you. So the first personal computer, I think when IBM and Microsoft MS-DOS, it has an ASC II character, and you communicated to the ASC II keyboard. Then the mouse got invented. When the mouse got invented, the OS and how the computer interacts with you changed. It became a graphical interface. You can point to things. Then you know what happens when the computer fell in the palm of your hand and your ability to touch. Well, now, with AI, computers understand our language. You can talk to them. You'll see what you see. So I think what I can predict is how we think about computers, OSs, and applications is going to be completely different when we think about the next 10 years. And maybe it's going to take about 5 years to try to get scale, but applications are going to be written different. Computers are going to function different because we just change fundamentally the interface. And we've seen that happening to generations. And I think that's one of the probably most not discussed part of AI, which is with AI, you can have a computer to interact with you. And even that can make humanoid robots more useful. And I think that definitely we're going to see that within the next 10 years.
Great. Aiman?
Yeah, for me, it's just, I'll bring it back to the convergence. It's not AI alone. It's AI with other things. So I think bioengineering is going to be quite impactful, I believe, in terms of evolution. What kind of organism, what kind of evolution we can get through that. Quantum, again, if we are really able to stabilize these quantum computers, this could have an impact. In 10 years, will we be there? Don't know. We will see. And I would add something else, which is becoming a bit back in fashion, is nuclear, notably with SMR technologies. So when you start looking at convergence between some of these technologies, you might see new things emerging, and it's not just AI on its own, it's AI combined, with some of these other next technologies that could be quite interesting.
Okay. Maybe wrapping up here, we'll start with you, Hiroaki. We have a lot of decision makers in the room here and also people following us online. What advice would you give to be able to unlock the kind of combinatorial power of these technologies that we've been discussing here? What's the very pithy piece of advice that you would give to decision makers and leaders on what do we need to do to actually unlock these capabilities in a way that's safe and, as Magdalena pointed out, sustainable?
Yeah, I think the key is to really get it really the core of the problem. Again, like I mentioned, this complex dynamic systems. And the reason why some of the discussion about a 10-year horizon is difficult, and also AI hasn't been practical before, now it's getting there. And robotics, we have to see, is if it's a confined environment, which like a tail part of head part of distribution is easier because it's more obvious, more data. Difficulties, autonomous driving, humanoid in the daily life, and then most of the AI is tail side. Long tail distributions, small minor exceptions, scarcity of data, and then that piles up to like a substantial part, 30%, 40%, even 6% in all the cases. How you handle that? How you AI gonna perceive and handle and provide a solution, or robotics to be able to cope with that? Robotics is expensive. You have to be able to do that. So that part gonna be the real challenge for next 10 years. And if we got, get the solution for that, I think we're gonna be very good. We're gonna be revolutionize entire society and industry.
Good. I'm going to invite the remaining panelists to compress and accelerate their answers. Cristiano.
What I'll say is, technology is moving very, very fast. Speaking from companies like Qualcomm that have been in the tech sector, you have to always reinvent yourself. So I think my advice to people is, a lot has happened in 1 year. I think he said like every 3 months you have something new. Try to understand what's happening because this technology is incredibly disruptive. It's going to change your company, and I think it's important for everyone to stay on top of it.
And
I'll be quick. So I think from our perspective, Cohere is focused on productivity in enterprises. And the whole challenge is developing platforms. It's not enough to just buy the AI feature inside your existing applications. You need a centralized platform to interface across all of those. That's where the real opportunity lies for these models.
thank Magdalena.
Very quick. Think broadly, and if you are in a position to invest, invest inclusively in the full sense of that word.
Thank you. Aiman?
For me, it really plays the role of orchestration. Define what you want to invest in, but also think ecosystem and what you need to partner with to be able to complement your capability and evolution of how you can be disrupted and how this ecosystem can disrupt industries.
Great. Thank you very much to our panelists there. I wish everybody a good continuation of the summit and also thank our viewers online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.